this morning. And yeah, it's good to see you. I know we've had a lot of conversations, both online and offline, about what's happening in Israel. And for everyone out there listening in the audience, just kind of give them an update. This is Wednesday morning here in Texas, around 8:30 a.m. In Israel, it's Wednesday afternoon, and everything we've seen from the news cycle in the West has been just kind of this doom and gloom on the verge of war. Everyone's in anticipation. I've seen some great shots, though, of the prayer wall there in Jerusalem and some real, it seems like, Israeli support, people loving that there's this moment where there can be unified about maybe what's happening and the potential threat of war with Iran. But just talk everyone through where you are, where Israel is, and also good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning to you and good afternoon to me. Yes, I thought at least, and a lot of people thought, that the attack that Iran promised about, well, now probably 15, 16 days ago, after the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, was going to happen over Tish B'Av, which was Monday night at sunset until Tuesday night. Monday night the 12th to Tuesday night the 13th. And today's Wednesday the 14th. The attack didn't happen. It was a very quiet day. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of people thought this attack was going to happen, and some are still concerned it will. In fact, the U.S., Canada, France, and maybe others sent an unbelievable amount of firepower to the Middle East about 2 weeks ago, right after this threat was made. They took it very, very seriously. There are two battle cruisers here, some battleships that specialize in carrying Tomahawk missiles. These are attack missiles. These are not defense missiles. And they have been, there are at least two atomic submarines. One was sent and is now reported to already be in the area of Cyprus, which is just off of Israel's coast in the Mediterranean. And the other was recently reported as already having been here for some time in the Red Sea, dealing with, or at least there to deal with, Yemen and the Houthis in Yemen, the rebel group there, which is also a proxy of Iran. So with all this firepower gathered and incredible, by the way, I have a unique and very credible inside source that told me that there were like 12 ships that were sent, and I was told warships, but they are unique because they have the best radar systems in the world. And this person I know who told me about this said he was very shocked there were 12 of them. That's an unbelievable amount. Well, having that kind of radar was very, very important in order to track, especially things like drones, as well as rockets. Missiles can be tracked, but they move very, very fast. So in any case, all this firepower was here. Everyone showed up. And it looks now like what has happened is Iran is backpedaling, not only in the face of the firepower, but interestingly enough, the World Bank, which never does this, issued a warning to Iran saying, if you do this, you are going to send your economy you're going to crater it.
Sure.
And you'll probably lose your government.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it wouldn't surprise me if that's a much more powerful deterrent to the imams of Iran than even the military stuff. If the economy craters, they already have a whole population, they have a whole population there, a large population that detests them. A lot of Iranians, come out of a liberal democracy from many, many decades ago, and they were taken over by this radical Islamic government. In any case, it's interesting now to see Iran saying, well, if if Israel and Hamas are able to get a deal to end the war in Gaza and have the hostages returned, we won't attack. And it has the appearance of them trying to climb down the ladder. They climbed a big ladder up, and now they're trying to back down. There was an immense amount, just all this firepower. I saw one report saying that there were so many U.S. or coalition drones flying over Lebanon that Hezbollah would not have been able to launch a drone or a rocket without it being seen where that location was. Sure. And the idea of U.S. drones or France drones and Canadian, all these drones flying over, was to identify launch sites so that they could be targeted and hit.
So this seems to me like one big giant war game. I mean, like they're just posturing, seeing what happens, making sure that they have position, advancing pieces essentially to flex on either side. So if Iran flexes, it's like there's a counter flex, and you have a lot of just posturing. I think most people realize that once there's that moment where the spark ignites something, whatever that move is, there's not a reverse button on that. There's generally going to be mass casualties, horrific devastation for not just the economy, but also landscape. And a lot of the areas there would just be war-torn. And you see images of that all the time, but it's just going to escalate so quickly that I'm assuming that both sides don't want to see it go to that point, but they want to see what happens if they try to go to that point, and then build countermeasures in place to react in the future to that. And I think they use the holiday, the Jewish holiday, as a point of reference to see what happens if we do try and do something on this day. What does the world do, and how do they respond? So it seems like a one big giant war game to me. I don't know. I know it's tense over there, and nobody wants to deal with the potential threat of an attack, because once that happens, there's just a small region there that's under immense attack, and then it just starts sort of spiraling out of control.
Well, Israel's a small region. The rest of the Arab nations are fairly large, but yes, Israel's a very, very small country, the size of New Jersey. I think it's often hard living abroad to grasp how small this country is. I can drive from here in Jerusalem to the border with Lebanon in 2.5 hours, maybe 3, depending on traffic. It's not far. I can drive to the farthest southern border in Eilat, which is on the Gulf of Aqaba, the Gulf of Eilat, if you will, and it's maybe a 4-hour drive. And that's going from the far north to the far south. And in the middle of the country, where you have the green line, where the so-called West Bank comes out, there's a very, very narrow strip there going north in Israel. If you want, the only alternative route for going north is to go into the Palestinian territories and drive up what's called the Aqaba or the Jordan Valley, which I've done many times. But for the last, certainly since October 7, I'm not driving it, and because there have been a lot of attacks, terror attacks on that road. So now if I want to go up north, I drive toward Tel Aviv, and I go north from Tel Aviv, and then I cut back over to the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. Now it's interesting. It's more than a game. Certainly, it's more than a game to people here. Israel's done some things it has never done in its history. It published a report that it was ready to shut down Ben Gurion. That's never happened. Ben Gurion is the international airport. It's located toward Tel Aviv, and it's always been considered a target. El Al Airlines right now is the only airline flying in and out of Israel.
I was going to ask you that. What's their travel like? Because I know they shut down the U.S. travel there.
Well, you can do it, but they're just limited options. One interesting thing about El Al is not only do they have high security with undercover security people on board every flight, but all of their airplanes are equipped with anti-missile technology now. And I think they're the only airline that has this. So Israel's talking about shutting down Ben Gurion. And then the Israel Museum, which houses the nation's most precious artifacts, artistic and archaeological artifacts, has reported that it is ready to move things underground to a secret location to protect them. This is really, really remarkable stuff. So they're taking it very seriously, and even U.S. Secretary of State Blinken, who was supposed to be here, canceled his trip. So although it looks like Iran has backed down, it's still a present threat. I don't. It's hard to read exactly how serious it would be going forward. My personal read is that the threat is diminished for the time being. But here's something I'm also seeing. I suspect, based on things I'm reading I look at Iranian media. They have like 4 or 5 different media outlets that are in English too, so they publish their stuff for everybody to read. There are reports that Iran is now accelerating its nuclear program, the development of its. So the feeling that at least I get is Iran is going, okay, well, we can't attack. Fine, we're going to go ahead and hasten the development of our nuclear program. And I don't think there's really any doubt that they want to have nuclear weapons. If they
Absolutely.
I suspect in their minds right now, what they're thinking is, you know what? If we were a nuclear power, the United States and France and Canada, they wouldn't be coming after us like this. They wouldn't dare, because we would have nuclear weapons. I think this is actually pushing them toward the finalization of their nuclear program. They're already on the cusp. They are already a nation that is able to develop a weapon in a matter of weeks.
Well, I think one of the interesting tie-ins to Scripture is that, there's references to how small Israel is, and how, you don't even have room to roll over in the bed, basically, and they want more territory from you, and how really frustrated Jesus gets and God gets at this tension point, which is you don't have much land, they want more of it, and it's just going to drive it towards some type of escalation of tension versus, and bringing in some level of aggression to move either the Palestinians into more territory, giving up, more land from Israel to do so, and Israel's hand being forced in that, and that leading to some sort of, cataclysmic end times kind of scenario. You got the Gog-Magog war, which is prophesied, where God puts a hook in the jaw and brings down armies and enemies and destroys them at the border. And you got all these references to future events that look like they're lining up. Like, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, do you think God's going to let them use it on Israel? And there's no way. I mean,
I don't see how that's possible based on what I see in Bible prophecy. I think God will stop that, but it's not going to be a very enjoyable process. And who knows the devastation that could be wreaked, and may very well be wreaked upon Syria. Whether that comes from Israel or some other force, there is a prophecy that Damascus will be totally flattened. That prophecy is more than 2,000 years old and has never been fulfilled. It's generally regarded as an end time prophecy. So it could be happening.
Well, and then the other thing is, there's news reports out there, and you would know better being closer to because you can never believe what you read on the internet, right? I mean, there's always stories running around. But the red heifer being sacrificed, is there any news swirling around there about a red heifer? And
every year there's one around Passover. The whole red heifer thing here is pretty much exclusive to the ultra-Orthodox community. So you don't see anything about it among Orthodox Jews. These are observant Jews who are modern, and they don't dress all in black. So it's regarded here as a bit of a extreme item and now there are a lot who are anticipating the rebuilding of a third temple, and there are many who have their eyes set on that. But they tend to be the most troublesome political members of Israel's government. So what you see here is a lot of dissatisfaction and division in the country because of what is perceived by many to be an attempt to make Israel a theocracy without the Messiah here. You know, in other words, a theocracy like, well, Iran is a theocracy, right?
Sure.
And supposedly Allah is calling the shots through Ali Khamenei. And they, for their part, and still, this cannot be emphasized enough. Iran's entire project under the Imams is to hasten the arrival of their Messiah, the Mahdi, M-A-H-D-I. In Arabic, it's a ha sound, a Mahdi. We would say Mahdi a lot of times, looking at it in English. If you look at the prophecies about the Mahdi that are proclaimed in every public gathering, in every speech, every army address, people have their names, like their middle name is Mahdi.
Oh, wow.
It's a very, very, very pervasive doctrine. And I say doctrine because it's not just religious, it's also political. So it is a religious political doctrine that this Mahdi is going to appear. And when he does, he's going to establish a worldwide caliphate, which in our language is a one world government. But in their scenario, this is under under Allah and in accordance with the Quran, which is at great odds with the Bible, right?
Great odds. And there's a great awakening happening in Iran because people who live under the Imam system, the theocratic system, they don't like it. It's very much a system that rewards masculinity and really chauvinism, and women are treated as what my dad would refer to as chattel, like cattle almost.
Right.
And there's a miserable life that is lived under that system of government that most people now are finding Jesus, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's this, religion out there that doesn't see me as property, that sees me as a child of God, that brings life to me. Now I have, a savior who died for my sins. Right. I'm redeemed in that. And they're finding life in all this goodness through this, under this regime. And you're seeing this great awakening. And if you're ever connected to Iranian, ministries that are helping to support that, there is a lot happening for the kingdom in that system. But then you go to, I'm sorry, one more thing. You go to what happens in the Bible, and when the Bible describes the end times, if you don't take the mark, you lose your head. I mean, that's still Sharia law. I mean, Sharia law is very, very, very serious. They don't treat sort of these crimes as petty crimes. I mean, you're losing a hand, you're losing a head. So it's not very difficult to see the one world government being led by some type of government like Iran, or some sort of leader that's coming out of that system and putting into place this dogma that, we are entering into the season of our prophetic words. This is our end times. And it just leads to the return of Christ.
Well, it's interesting. Their end times narrative is eerily similar to ours. It just substitutes Allah for the God of Israel and the Mahdi for Yeshua, the Messiah, right? So they have their own mirror of our narrative. And yes, Islam, radical Islam, is very, very ruthless. It sanctifies being ruthless. It makes it makes hatred and murder a holy thing.
Yeah.
Right? And so it has a very strong appeal to what we call the flesh, right? And it allows anger that may otherwise be subdued or repressed to give expression, because now it's a holy thing, right? And you can do violence against people, against your wife. Women can be abused. People who disagree with you can be put to death. They can be hung. They can be beaten to death. All to the glory of Allah. So it's a very, very disturbing, dark eschatology that is being promoted and is actually thoroughly embraced by the imams of Iran and those in Iran who've embraced that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
On a slightly lighter note, black humor, let's call it, you might be aware that Saudi Arabia is also, well, they're not a threat right now, but they behead a lot of people. That's their capital punishment. They do it every year, and they're known for this. A number of years ago, when Facebook was in its earlier stages, you could post an article and change the headline, right? Can't do that anymore. But at the time, there was a story out. Saudi Arabia was recruiting people to come in and wield the sword in these executions.
Very medieval.
So it was an advertising. Want a job? So I said, I changed the title. I said, want to get ahead? Job?
It's a ZipRecruiter job listing.
Okay, like I said, that's dark humor, and we're not laughing. I laugh at puns.
Everyone's laughing, but the guy that lost his head. I mean, that's not bad. Yeah. It's pretty good.
But yes, the scripture makes it very clear that there are going to be beheadings in the last days.
Yeah, it's real, and I think that's literal language. I don't think that's
I agree.
Any kind of yeah. So I want to end with sort of this holy war moment and all the tension that spills over even into our government. And you sent an article to me this morning about a protest against Israel next week in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention. There was 100 organizations planning to protest, and this is real here because our vice president, on the ticket for Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, is an outspoken pro-Palestine, leader. I mean, he's very much sympathetic to the Palestinian people. Obviously, in Minnesota, where he's from, there's a huge population of people that are Muslim and support Palestine or anti-Israel. He's got anti-Semitic rhetoric in him. So you see this in even America, where there's dividing lines that are very serious. And so I guess my question to you is how do people in America sort of live their lives with people who may be sympathetic to Palestine and not get too aggressive with it? Because I think you do a good job of kind of understanding that at the end of the day, your neighbor is your neighbor. You may disagree, but how do you not let that play out if it becomes such a holy war of Allah versus, the God of Israel? Does that question make sense? Am I being too heavy with it?
It's something, you're right, I live with, because I live in a Palestinian neighborhood. All my neighbors are Palestinians. My doctor, my grocers, my car repairman, I live here, right? Now, most of the Palestinians where I live are Christian Palestinians, which is a very small minority of Palestinians in general. And Christian here means mostly Catholic and Greek Orthodox. But these are people who are not wanting to destroy Israel. They might not like Israel, but almost all of them in one way or another are doing business with Israel, and they're being very successful because of it. Their biggest problem is dealing with their Muslim neighbors who are in the majority and are ready and willing to harass and persecute and even push them out of business. This has happened here a lot. It's the main reason, in fact, why the Christian population of Bethlehem has dropped from 80, 90% down to 15% or less. It's now almost none of them are Christians. Bet Jala, which is it's part of the greater Bethlehem, is mostly Christian, maybe 50%, maybe a little more than 50% Christian. And by the way, the Christians that fled Bethlehem largely went to the United States. The Christians that fled Bet Jala, interestingly enough, and there are 500,000 of these refugees, where do you think they went? Do you have any guess? What would be your guess?
Where they went? I would think they went maybe to some European country. I don't know.
They went to Chile.
Well, that sounds nice. Let's go to Chile.
Yeah, there are like 500,000 Palestinians. There's a whole community living in Chile. So when I go to if I go to a grocery store in the Bethlehem area, the major grocery store there has a store here and has a store in Chile.
So that's a pretty long trip. Why Chile?
I don't know. I don't know how it happened. I don't have the backstory on that. I know that, like you, when I first heard of this about 10 years ago, I was very surprised. It seemed like totally unexpected.
It's almost a hive mind kind of thing, because we were in Wyoming a few weeks ago for family vacation, and our Uber driver to the airport was from Romania. And in Wyoming, you just have a very, very sparse population and a lot of outdoors people. And the day before, we'd been at a hotel having lunch, and the waitress was from Romania. And I said, "Hey, I just had a waitress yesterday from Romania. That's weird." He goes, "There's a lot of us here." And he goes, "I don't know how it started. I didn't come here because there was Romanians here. I just had a friend that said Wyoming is great, and the climate is similar to Romania. And they got mountains and, snow and nice places to see and wildlife." And so I don't know if in Palestine somebody just said, "Hey, there's a place in Chile that kind of feels similar to here, but without the stress," and then it just spread around, and then they all booked flights or whatever. I don't know. It's interesting to say that.
Yeah. So and there is, to this day, there is active communication between families there and here. So there's a very close link, even though they're on the other side of the world.
It's amazing. Well, I know you have a heart out, so let's go ahead and wrap up. But I think next week we may be able to go live on Substack, but also be posting this on YouTube. And the purpose of this is us to have just casual conversations about what's happening in Israel and any other things in the news with the great Brian Schrager, who's a genius and full of knowledge and wisdom about all things that's happening in the world related to Israel and to the political region over there. So anything you want to say to close?
I would just encourage people to continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We need God's shalom as much now as we did going into Tish B'Av thinking the attack would happen. Please don't let up. I mean, the rest of the world is not letting its guard down. Israel's not letting its guard down. And Israel's defenders, the United States, thank God, and Chile, and not Chile, the United States, and Canada. We were just talking, so Canada and France. By the way, I think we ask people to pray before Tish B'Av, and I think it's important to acknowledge that those prayers were answered. God prevented an attack from happening. Yes, He used all kinds of human institutions and military forces, but they did not attack. And that is something to really give thanks for and praise God for doing. His hand protected Israel. And it did not happen. Now, we need to continue to pray, because the big threat is perhaps now growing more than ever, which is the nuclear threat.
I think it's the most important thing you've said today, which is honoring the fact that prayers work and keep praying. I mean, because it's true, because sometimes you can just gloss over the fact that there was peace during this time, and you were texting me and telling me there was people at the grocery store.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think it's great.
really, we did say, turn your head away, shut your eyes, whatever, when we're done, and say, thank you, Abba. Right?
Yes.
Thank you. You answered prayer, and it's really nice to see, because we often don't get to see clear answers like we received on Monday night and Tuesday.
Hmm. Good. All right, Brian. Have a great evening there. I'm
Thank
starting my day. Got my kids off school and headed to the office. But yeah, we'll talk next week. And anything else that comes up, make sure you let our End Times community know.
you. Will do.
All
Thank you,
right, bud.
Brent.
See ya.
God bless.